Hello, everybody. Welcome, family, to Livingtree's very first live stream. We're excited to start doing this. I just wanted to give you a little background before we introduce our first guest today. Honored to have her. We did a series of webinars at Livingtree over the course of the last 3 years, and we've had just an incredible journey. Part of our mission, even though we are a technology company, is we wanted to deliver great pedagogy around how to use that technology most effectively when it comes to engaging families. And so we knew there was a difference between the technology and the use of that technology. And so our webinar series was really an effort to bring the best of the best. And actually, Patricia was on one of our webinars, but to bring the best of the best content to our family out there. And what was interesting is we had amazing webinars. We had, and sometimes upwards of 500 people on a webinar. We grew that audience tremendously over the last 2.5, 3 years, in part to Kellen, who's kind of behind the scenes here, did an amazing job with that. But we had some of the most rich dialogue, the most rich conversations before the webinar and after the webinar, and just conversations about school, about life, what was going on, challenges, struggles that were going, that we were both facing from a company, from the guest point of view, things they were working on. And we thought to ourselves, gosh, that is so much fun. It's great to be able to just have a conversation, get to know each other. In some cases, we didn't know each other at all. So it was our opportunity before and after to get to know each other. And when we did that, it was like, gosh, our audience missed out on all of that rich dialogue that we were having. And so we put our heads together and said, look, we have never done a live webinar before or a live stream before, but we're going to challenge ourselves as a company to make sure that we are meeting our audience wherever they might be. So if that's on LinkedIn, if that's on YouTube, if that's on Twitter, if that's wherever, Facebook, you might live, we want to make sure that we bring those great, rich conversations to our family and to a broader family. So with that, I am so excited today to have Patricia with us. She is the author of No More Mumbo Jumbo, which may be getting retitled, I think. But Patricia, thank you so much for joining us today and for going through this kind of experiment with us.
Well, I am so excited about this because I love the idea of it. I love this kind of unplugged, unscripted back and forth. I think it's going to be really rich. And truthfully, if we're going to change education, these are the conversations we need to have. We need to, of course we need to learn, of course we need presentations, but we need to be able to dialogue like this. So I love this idea, and I'm so honored that you asked me to participate. I really am. And it's good to
Well,
see you again.
good to see you as well. I'm glad we get to do this. Super exciting. So I'm going to just piggyback off of the title of the book, because I know no more mumbo jumbo. When you hear that, or at least when I heard it for the first time, it was very clear to me what you were talking about, specifically in the context of family engagement. Because there's a tendency to use a lot of jargon, to use language that families don't necessarily understand on a day-to-day basis.
Right.
And so walk me through a little bit of that. Your book. What was the kind of inspiration behind the title, and what are some of the main kind of key takeaways from that?
Well, let me give you just a little bit about my background, and then you'll kind of get
Yes.
an idea where I came to this. Because it wasn't a linear path. I am not an
Mm.
educator, and I still feel like I'm learning a lot from educators. I spent 10 years in a public school district working in education and working specifically in family engagement. So I developed an expertise, but really, um, I am not an educator. I'm a journalist by training. So I actually always wanted to grow up to be a broadcast news reporter. So I went to school for that, majored in journalism, got a couple of degrees, and I actually got to live out that dream. Um, when my kids were really young, I had the privilege to be able to make a decision to stay home with them. I actually had three children under the age of two, which was kind of crazy. But after a couple years, I decided I still want to make a difference in this world. And
Mm.
along my time staying home with the kids, I'd met a woman for the local public school district. She ended up hiring me in part because she felt that a lot of the challenges in education were in communication. So I
Mm.
started working running a large federal grant for the district. And I started to realize when I sat through meetings that I didn't understand half of what was going on. I didn't understand the language, I didn't understand the acronyms. I'd been home with the kids. I didn't even know what Google or Microsoft Word was. I mean, I was really I had a giant learning curve. And it occurred to me that if I'm not understanding this language, here I am working in family engagement, how can families possibly understand this? To me, it just sounded like mumbo jumbo and gobbledygook.
Mm.
At the same time, I started going to these wonderful, amazing, had this opportunity to go to these amazing national conferences. And I promise you, at least once during every session, somebody would say, "Why do we talk to families the way we do? They don't even understand it. Why do we use that language?" So at one of the conferences, I just thought, I can help with this because actually, this is the skill of a broadcast journalist. It's really this ability to
Wow.
take very complicated subjects and break them down in ways that are clear and concise and ways that resonate. So, at one of the conferences, I thought, I'm just going to get some thoughts on paper. And I ended up writing a book. So, that's kind of how
Wow.
it all came about. It was very
That's amazing.
organic. And I'm not kidding when I say I felt compelled to do it. At times I was like, this is ridiculous. What am I doing here? And it's like the idea was pestering and pestering until
Mm.
I finally got it done. It took 6 years because I was raising all those little kids, and like I know a lot of parents are. We have a lot on our plates, parents and caregivers. But I finally got it out in the world, and I feel like it's my contribution.
It's
It's something I
amazing
can
work.
kind of
No,
do.
yeah,
Well,
it's
I appreciate.
amazing. I wish I could just put something down on paper and it turns into a book.
No,
um,
it's a real process. And what they say, that writer's doubt, that is 100% true. I mean, I was like, this is ridiculous. Why am I doing this? But it actually, I'm amazed. I mean, it's really making a difference. And that was what I wanted.
that's absolutely amazing, and I think the work kind of speaks for itself. As you have been kind of going through that journey, talk to me a little bit about the family side. As a mom, feeling that passion that I need to do something. I want to make this contribution, but at the same time, having family, and I experienced this myself. With Livingtree. I have three kids, and this juggling of, I want to make this contribution to education. I also want to be a good example of family engagement, and both of those things require an enormous amount of work. So talk to me a little bit about that, and did that influence how you wrote the book, as in, kind of thinking about that audience of who's going to read this, and how do you balance all of these things that are going on, time balance, and learning how to make sure that I make my communication something that everybody can understand. Walk me through that a little. Walk me through some of that.
Well, I really, I struggled with that. I struggled finding the time to do everything. I was really fortunate because as the executive director of family engagement for my district, I was telling everyone to engage with their families. And so I was able to do that, within the confines of my job. I'm also very fortunate because my husband was able to help. And at one point, the first 2 years I was working on the book, I didn't tell anyone because I thought this isn't even going to go anywhere. The third year, I finally told my husband, I've been working on this, and he said you need to finish it. And so he did a lot of the heavy lifting during that time, and that allowed me to get it done. But absolutely, my experience as a mom, knowing that I have so much resource and so much privilege, my experience as a mom for sure snuck into that book. I mean, I was the person receiving the communications that I didn't
Mm,
understand. I was the
yes.
one, you ones getting the letters that I thought if I wasn't in education, I would have no idea what this was. So when you're a journalist and a mom, you really have that outside perspective all the time. That is
Mm,
really my background as a journalist. I'm always looking at everything from a very impartial way. So I could step back from a letter and think, what is this about? This makes no, this is not right. And what I
yeah.
ended up doing, and I think a lot of our families feel this way, you end up just getting almost mad because
Mm,
it feels disrespectful. Do you not want me to know? Do you not want me to understand? I mean, at times it feels almost disrespectful. We want to keep you at an arm's length. We really
yes.
will take it from here. And so if we're able to build those bridges and use that language that everyone can understand, use that real partnership tone and really send home the sweet spot of information, we really can engage families. But right now it's a challenge. And truthfully, it's a challenge not just, because it's kind of the way we've always done things in education, but it's a challenge because everyone's plates are so full that you
Yes.
don't just sit there and go, I'm going to really spend time on this letter, or I'm going
Yeah.
to design the perfect flyer, and I'm going to give myself the space. And then maybe
Yes.
when I get it done, I'm going to email it to myself and open it on my phone to make sure it looks good, or I'm going to
Yeah.
send this to my parent friend to see if she gets it. We often don't have time to do that.
It
Yeah.
was very interesting. So we were working with Dr. Ortero, and he said something that really resonated with me around reclaiming our role in education. And at first, I thought he kind of misspoke. I was like, "What reclaiming?" Um, and he was talking about this idea of relationship and how much the relationship matters. And he gave this example of having a parent teacher conference or a principal parent conference where you just talk, you just have a conversation with no real agenda other than to get to know that person and what makes them tick and why do they care about, what are their goals for their kids, and what are their aspirations, for their kids in life. And I thought, what a what a beautiful idea about the way school should work. And then you kind of contrast with the day to day. It's this urgent versus important kind of conversation. And because I've been in both worlds, I've been an assistant principal, I've been a teacher, and so I know the demands. And I think about, okay, gosh, I love that ideal world, and I know that he's right. Um, but how do I do that in face of, like, tardy sweep and the bell schedule and everything else that's going on? How do I make that a priority in my school? And I can totally understand the struggle of doing that. So talk to me a little bit about, what are some of the struggles that you're seeing as you're working with schools, as it relates to, families. I know families have been a huge topic over the last year. I mean, if there's no, I would say, there's no silver lining to COVID in terms of just what's happening, but there have been some dramatic shifts, and tectonic shifts in education, that I don't think would have happened if this didn't, the world didn't kind of change. And some of them are good. And one of them is the importance of the role of families. So talk to me about what you're seeing out there as you're working with districts. What are some of those struggles you're seeing? How are you helping them through some of those?
Well, I think I just really want to lift up that idea of the relationship. The relationship is the most important thing. And, you're trying to build that and preserve that using your communication. I think those two go in hand in hand. I say this all the time. If we didn't know it before, we know it now. communicating with families, building relationships with families isn't nice. It is absolutely necessary.
Yeah.
And when you look at the pandemic, it's been terrible. It's been beyond words. I mean, how do we even put it into our, I mean, it's almost inconceivable. But I think some of what happened and some of what I'm hearing is that we had families and educators communicating like they've never communicated before. I think for the first time, I know in the district where I worked, we had teachers calling families to check on them, to find out how their kids were doing. And in the process, I think teachers walked away with a true understanding of everything that families have on their plate. At the
Mm.
same time, families were peeking over their shoulders while their kids were in class. I mean, I think they really got, for the first time, an understanding of what school is like today. A lot of them are stuck in there in kind of the vision of what it was like when they were in school. And as we know, education has completely changed. I think those two things really created an opportunity. It is, and we now know need to do. We now know, that we've got to bring families into the learning process. We've got to build those relationships. And I think for a lot of families, they really want to know more. They got a
Mm.
taste of it,
Yeah.
and they want to know more. They want to sit at the table. They want to have a say. They want to offer up their expertise. So we've got to be ready for that. So that's a lot of what I'm seeing. And I like to just say, exactly what you said. We wouldn't have had that if not, for this moment. And I think as we look to reinvent education and as we look to wrap supports around children, we've got
Mhm.
to be able to have that family expertise and that family knowledge at the table.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I've been amazed in just listening to you and the advice that we've heard, uniformly. One of the things that I, like to do just because of the position we've been put in is just listening to people who are working with schools and working, on the research side of things and working, practically in schools and what are the needs there. And there was this trend line that we saw, and then you kind of alluded to that, is that if you don't value the relationship and really reframe or reclaim, as George Otero put it, what the role of a school is and what your role within that is, then it's not going to change, right? It's not going to make that shift. And I feel like right now we're in this world where we've got our toe in both on both sides of it, and we're going to have to choose at some point, I would imagine, and say, hey, this has the world has changed, the way education works has changed, and we've got to change. I just trying to put myself in a teacher's point of view. How would I reframe my classroom to understand my parents, to involve them, to engage them in this process, and make that a priority? And I think some of that just comes down to leadership. Your leaders in the school have to give teachers the space to do that kind of stuff within the constraints that they have. Talk to me a little bit about what you're seeing with leaders. Where are those leaders at in this conversation? What are some of the struggles that you're seeing there?
Well, I want to build on something that you said. We
Yes.
need to give educators the space. Absolutely. We've got to figure out a way to restructure things because at the end of the day, if you build those rich relationships with parents, as an educator, your job is easier. And we heard that
Mhm.
from in Ann Henderson's presentation that you all hosted a couple weeks ago. I mean, the research is clear on that. Family
Yes.
participation in education is one of the greatest predictors of success. So building those relationships, I think, is really important. We've got to give them the space. We've also got to give them the professional development.
Mhm.
Now is the moment. I got to tell you, there's been a whole group of people working in family engagement for years. And we've been sitting over here just ready and waiting for our moment. And I
Yes.
feel like it's our moment.
It's now.
I think all of us working in this field, we're having an amazing amount of people reach out and ask for help and ask
Yes.
for professional development. And the great thing is we've got the research to prove it. And in many instances, there's a lot of really rich content out there that I think we're all ready to present, and I think that can really benefit educators. So that space and that I think as far as leaders go, what's really important, leaders set the tone and the climate and culture of a building. So,
Yes.
the biggest thing I think, and I think you realize this as you are kind of on your path in education, the biggest thing you can do is work in that climate and culture to create a school that is welcoming and a school that communicates that they value parents and that they value the parents' expertise, and that they want parents to help invent and reinvent education and help them look critically at systems and try to help figure it out. And I think didn't wasn't that your experience?
Yeah, absolutely. When I started off, as a teacher, and then I moved into administration, um, it was very interesting because in the classroom, I had control over a lot of that. And as a science teacher, I did sales for 3 years before I taught. In fact, the last place I wanted to be was in the classroom, I thought, because I went to school to be a teacher. But after 3 years of doing door-to-door sales, I was like, yes, teaching is definitely, it's right for me now. And in retrospect, it couldn't have planned it that way, but it was amazing because what I learned in sales that I brought into the classroom was listening to my customer, listening to, what they were telling me that they wanted. And so when I brought that into the classroom, even though I didn't plan it that way, it was the best experience I could have ever done. Even better than my student teaching experience, because
I,
I went in with this idea that I have to sell these kids on the idea that science is important. It's important. And so everything I did was with that mentality of like, hey, why does this matter to you? Why should you even care about this? Why should you even listen to me? And so we did stuff that was interesting to them, right? Science is all around you. Science is at the beach. Science is on a surfboard. Science is in the chair that you're sitting in. Somebody said, hey, this desk, the one before wasn't great. So let's make a new one. And someone built that thing. And that's science. In my view of the world then and still, science was everything around you. Everything you touched and saw, somebody thought, hey, this is a great idea, and they brought it into the world. They had the courage to go do that. So, I was part motivator, part educator, inspirational talks, but I wanted them to develop a love of science. And then I moved that into, administration. But in administration, I ran up against a lot of friction sometimes in some of the things that we wanted to do because there was so much tradition that I was breaking. In some of the ideas that I was bringing forward. So but yes, I did see a problem, particularly around when I moved into administration around dropout prevention. I saw kids that were coming into my office over and over and over again, and it was like almost predictable. It's like, okay, we run our F list, and they'd come in, so they had two more Fs, and then we'd run our attendance list, and I'd have the same group of kids come in, and then I'd run my behavior list, and there was like five or more behavior incidences, and I'm literally seeing the same kid 3 times on 3 different lists, and we were treating as if they were different kids, and I'm like, all of this data is connected. Why don't we look at it like it's connected to each other? Like they're on their
right.
way to dropping out, and we're just not even seeing it. And so that was the inspiration for my very first company was, can I give tools to administrators and counselors so that they can see the right kid at the right time and not be a data scientist or an AI expert, but really just have a really simple indicator, say, hey, this kid is at risk now, and if you can prevent that from happening, you will increase their trajectory in life, in school, kind of all around. And it was interesting. It was really interesting work because
Well, and once you begin to unpack that, what is going on, you end up figuring out what is this family like? What is this?
Yes.
What are these caregivers? What's this? I mean, that is just such an important part of the equation. I love what you said about listening because I talk
Yes.
a lot about the words and the tone and the information, but what good communication comes down to is listening and really
Yes.
opening your heart to receiving information. So I didn't want that to get lost. I
I know, and
absolutely
I just
love
kept
that.
going.
No, but it was just such a beautiful, it's so true. I mean, that is where we want to be, where parents and educators are both bringing in expertise. We're partners. We've got to be
Yes.
able to listen to each other. So I love that. And the other part of your story that I love is this idea that you saw a need and I think, I don't want to put words in your mouth. I think it was the same thing where you were like compelled to do something about it, and you
Yes.
did. And I think, if we are really, hopefully, through this session and through the sessions that you're going to have, I hope that if there is an educator out there that has an idea, perhaps it's something that's like pestering them and won't go
Yes.
away, we're going to need to lift up those ideas, because this is the moment that we really have to think very creatively about how we teach and the welfare of our students and the support that we're wrapping around our families. It's
Yes,
going to be really
absolutely.
important, and we need
Yes.
everyone's voice. And we can obviously can't do it without the voice of families.
Absolutely. I could not agree more. I know, just in the work that we've been doing, that voice has come to, I think it was a low pitch. Now it was a rumble, and now it is screaming loud. Hey, you have to involve us in our child's education, and everything we've been doing has been around that. How do we make that easy? Um, so, what are some of the tips that you give school districts when they're saying, "Hey, I totally resonate with that message. I want to really know, some practical things." You say, Gary, if there's one thing you could do today, even in your live stream, here's what I would recommend that you start. What's that starting point?
Well, that is something I'm really proud of. As a journalist, I would sit through a lot of professional development sessions, and you sit there and they can be long and they can be complicated and they can be full of jargon, and you find yourself thinking, what do I want for lunch? And then at the end of the time, you're really like, okay, I get it. What do I do? So
Yeah.
we often come and we've got to do family engagement, and this is what it is and all that, but at the end of the day, it's like, what do I say? What do I do? The work that
Hmm.
I do is really answers those questions. What do I say? What do I do? It's super practical. So here are my quick, can I give you three instead of just one?
Absolutely. Yes.
Okay, my top three tips.
Top
Don't use
three.
a $5 word if a 50-cent word will work. And if you
Nice.
really start to think about it, if you're writing something or talking about something, if you're using that educational jargon, go ahead and circle it. I mean, go ahead and really sit there and think, what words here my parents not understand, and then
Mm.
substitute those big $5 words with 50-cent words, with simple words. Now keep in mind, we are not dumbing down the information. I
Mm.
mean, we're presenting it in a way that's understandable. I think it's really important as we get started with this idea of engaging families and really communicating with them and really recognizing their expertise at the table. We have to understand that they can understand. They can participate. They do have the capacity to help their children, and we've got to just hold that close in our heart. We should never underestimate our family's ability to participate. I say we could all be rocket scientists. We could understand that, I'm sure, if somebody presented it in a very clear, concise way using very simple words. So that's my number one tip. My number two tip: be aware of your acronyms. I mean, we love acronyms in education, don't we? We just,
Oh yeah.
In fact,
Yes.
sometimes we come up with the acronym and then name the program just to make sure we have it.
Right.
Crazy.
Right.
Such a joke in
Start code
school.
first.
I know, it's like, anyway, it's so inside baseball. And so one of the things I say is don't just, if you have to define the acronym, but not just the words that the letters stand for, but what is that? So if you say a behavior intervention plan, a BIP is a behavior intervention plan. First off, the word intervention is very scary.
Mm,
But if you say the behavior intervention plan, the plan we will work on together to make sure your child has exactly what they need to succeed. You know, who wouldn't want one, right? I mean, you
right.
have to kind of define what that is. And then my last tip, and you can start using this absolutely immediately. Instead of saying parents can pick up their children after the game, or parents can pick up their children after school, start using you. You can pick up your child. Um, you can send in your money. That you is
Mhm.
actually a word that elicits emotion. And so words like you, words like your child, words like we, all of these convey emotion and convey partnership. So that is
Mm.
something very simple you can do. Start using the word you. If you listen
Wow.
a lot to broadcasting, that is one of the hallmark principles of it. You know, your taxes are going up and all of a sudden you're like, "What?" You know,
So
right? Like you're
that is
mad.
really now that you mention it, yeah, I do hear that a lot. So what is it about you that 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 changes the way that I think about that topic? So when I say you to a family, what is it about that?
It's as if you are having a one-on-one conversation with somebody.
Mm,
It's as if you are, and there's research that shows that. So if you write a test question, Johnny goes down to buy a loaf of bread, or you write
yeah.
that question, you go down to buy a loaf of bread, students score higher on the question written with the you because you
Wow.
read that and you think your brain is in a conversation. And so it pays extra attention. So there's just
Wow.
something emotional. So one of the things that I do is I read some statements. I ask people to close their eyes or kind of, you know, just focus on what I'm saying. And you can feel an emotional connection. In
Mm,
addition to that, it's just the way we talk. I mean, you know, I'm not, it's the way I've said you a million times already, right? You said you to me. It's just kind of more personable and it sounds one on one and it makes a stronger connection. Three simple
that's
things people can start doing right
I
away.
love that. Those are easy. Those are easy
Yeah.
to do. And it's a great starting point. I mean, I feel like when I've, first started in my journey on family engagement, I had the pleasure of sitting under Dr. Constantino. I was just a teacher in the audience at that time,
He's so great.
and
He's
and I
great.
was listening to him, and he said, have a conversation with your families, bring them in, talk to them, and so we did that as a school, and I was just amazed at how simple that act of understanding my families changed how I did business. How I conducted myself in the school, my understanding, my empathy for where they're at and what they're going through, changed completely. Same with home visits. When I was able to do home visits as a teacher, it wasn't the family that changed. It was me. I changed.
Right.
How I thought about the world changed.
How did that
When
then change the way you how did that then change the way you taught or approached your students?
you know,
That
um,
knowledge.
I I'll give you so one of the home visits that we did. We were going in and we had a translator. And actually, what I was trying to do is um, at our school, we were a middle school, and we had students that would fail, and then we would go and put them in the exact same classes the next year. And it's basically like, hey, a redo. And I thought this was insane. I was like, so wait, they failed all of these classes the year before, and we're going to put them in the same classes again with the same teachers a lot of times and expect something different. Um, So, but that was the thought. So I had an idea, and luckily I had a supportive principal. It's like, what if we put some supports in place for these kids that was different? Study skills, helping them navigate time and priority, time management. A lot of them, struggled with that, just simple things. So in order to do that, I had to do home visits in order to get parent sign off on this. And as I went, and did those, um, just something in me changed about what I wanted to do for these kids, for all my kids, but for this particular group of kids that had failed the year before. I mean, I was so determined after doing that and I had the support of those families to help me whatever I was doing in the classroom or doing in these school programs. I knew I had a partner. And so I was like, man, there's no way we can't be successful.
Right.
I felt so empowered, and it was great. I mean, it was absolutely amazing. But my own determination and will to kind of see this successful and help them to get to that next level and not repeat, in some ways what I feel like we had failed them, because of the way we do things. I was like, that's not going to happen again. So it was that I just felt even more
Love it.
empowered after that conversation. So
Love it. Yeah.
yeah, it was awesome. It was super
It can
awesome.
just change everything. I mean, having those relationships and building those relationships with families. I think right now, we talked about this a little bit earlier, they are ready. They're ready to engage. They're ready to offer up their expertise. So when you think about, there's a lot of emotion going on in education, a lot of
Yes.
emotion on the part of both educators and families. And I think if we are really thoughtful, we can channel that emotion in a really powerful way. So, for
Yes.
example, if you've got families who are really, you know, um, engaged, no matter what that looks like,
Yes.
but they're engaged and they're fired up. One simple thing you could do is start a communication team. What is not working?
Yeah.
We now know that you want this information and we now want to give it to you. What hasn't quite worked?
Yes.
What system isn't working, or how can we streamline, or, do you mind looking over this before I send it out? I mean, what a
Yes.
simple, easy way for them to bring their expertise. All that will be required of them is to offer up their opinion. I
Yes.
mean,
I I I don't know if you're watching Ted Lasso at all. I
yeah,
think the
so
rest
great.
of America is watching Ted Lasso, but I was watching one of the episodes, and it was when he first came in, and he had the suggestion box. I don't know if you remember this
Yes.
episode, and I thought it was so interesting because there's so many leadership lessons, and a lot of people have talked about this in articles. Just kind of the lessons learned from Ted Lasso, but related to what we were just talking about, it's not just eliciting the feedback, but then, when he took that feedback about the shower head, right? And
Right.
they went in and he fixed it, right? He got feedback. He went in and said, tried it out himself, said, yeah, this sucks. The water pressure is not great, and had them fix it. Um, and then, that guy turned on the shower and it blasted him in the face.
Right.
But the
Right.
the point was to say you can't just listen to the feedback, but you have to genuinely want to take that feedback and do something with it, because that was the powerful moment, why, like, that started to change, that team in the show, their perception, like, hey, this guy's not just words, he's not just asking for my feedback and then doing nothing with it. He literally
Right.
took that feedback and instantly did something. So I think there's something so powerful in that, in asking for feedback, but then being willing to do something about it when you get it.
Right.
So
And then, the last step of that is pointing out what you've done. In the Ted Lasso, they turned it on and they realized, right? But I was working with a school once, and the principal said, we just don't get parents to fill out our surveys, our annual surveys. We just have such low response, and
mm,
we've made some significant changes. We created this whole computer where parents can actually log on and check grades as they wait to pick up their kids. We've made some changes based on these surveys. And I said, have you pointed that out? Have you actually told them, thank you so much for filling out our last surveys? Here are the changes we made because you pointed out to us that this is what you needed or this wasn't working. So closing that loop, I think, is always real. How many of us take surveys and we feel like they go off into the world and we
Nowhere.
never hear back? I mean, we've got to be mindful of that, of communicating. And you know, Ted Lasso, that was just so funny where the guy falls back because he gets hit in the head from the water pressure. But yeah, you know, that's
uh,
something that's part of that communication. We've got to close that loop.
yes, I agree. I agree. Well, Patricia, I don't want to keep you all afternoon. I know that you are on your, I believe you're about to take some time off, so probably much needed and deserved. But any last words for our audience, our family, as they kind of are thinking probably, hey, we just made it through Q1. Or actually
Yeah.
Q1 for schools, although they probably don't call it Q1. That's first quarter. My kid's just got his grades, so I know that that's happened at least here in Florida. And as they're headed into kind of the holidays and then the new year, any words of wisdom for them?
Well, for educators, I just want to say thank you. I
Mm,
mean, my goodness, what a heavy lift it's been. And I just, you know, I don't want to start to get all teary, but it's just been so challenging, so very challenging. And I think one of the things I noticed very quickly when I started working in my district, I have never worked with a more committed, more passionate group of people in my life. I mean, educators are in it to do what's best for kids. And I just think we always need to be mindful of that. So thanking them and lifting up their concerns and making sure that they feel supported, not just in the I'm gonna, you know, bring some food into the school, but really listened to and supported and engaged as we look to face all of the challenges. For families, what I'm gonna say is what I say to my own kids: life's not a race. This is an extraordinary time. And you know, we'll get there. We'll get there. So if there's anything I can say to them, it's just, you know, what's most important is that we recognize and try to wrap supports around students and families. A lot of them are still really struggling, and we need to be mindful that all of these things that we've put in place are things we can change.
yeah,
This
yeah,
benchmark, we can change it. We created it, right? We just have to
yes.
be mindful that it's not about right now. It's just an extraordinary time. I think when it comes to family engagement, acknowledging and channeling that passion that we're seeing into a productive conversation and opening those lines of communication and making sure that we are mindful of that engagement and walking alongside, doing with, not doing to, as we move forward in the
Mm,
years ahead. That's going to be really, really important. And to build on the point that you made earlier, that listen on all these fronts, listening is going to be the key. Effective communication is going to be the key. It's going to be the key to making sure that we're showing teachers some love by listening to
yeah,
them. Going to be important as we look to figure out where are our students and what do they need, and you know, how are we going to change things, and then finally, how are we going to make sure that these lines of communication with families that we've opened stay open, and that, you know, it's that listening, I think, is going to be key.
I think so too. Something we did recently here at Livingtree, and it was powerful just for me personally, is we did thank you videos to all our customers, personalized, and just kind of for their partnership with us, for everything that that we've worked on together in partnership, for on the give side, for their community and how much they've been able to raise, for on the engage side, for the number of communications they have out to families and the impact that that has had, and just it's a simple way to just express gratitude. And I was just, the more I did it, the more I felt grateful myself for this family that I have the pleasure of working with every day, and be saying, hey, how can we be better? How can we be better to support our districts, to support our families? And it just filled me with gratitude as we head into this. So, I'm thinking about that. What a simple thing to do, to just send a thank you to your teacher, to send a thank you to your families, acknowledging, hey, we are in partnership together. And that takes very little time, no money, and just, a little bit of effort to do that. And I think it will go a long, long way. So
I
with that,
love
I want to say
I love
thank
that.
you.
Yes, no, I love that. I love every bit of that. Yeah,
It's
and
amazing.
we need, and plus we need that beauty in the world right now.
Yes.
We just
Yeah,
do.
absolutely. Absolutely. Find ways. Be creative. Audience, thank you so much for our first live stream. I could not be more pleased to have Patricia
Yeah.
as our guest. And thank you for sharing your wisdom, your passion in this topic. And I hope you will come join us again as we kind of progress down this road.
Yes, thank you, so much. I always love working with you guys, and thank you for the opportunity to today. It was a really really fun conversation, and it was exactly the conversation we'd have after the PowerPoint was done. I love
Exactly.
that.
So if you
You know
think
what I
of the
mean?
name,
Yes,
meant
I
to be.
actually wrote something down here, so
Okay.
we'll figure it out. Anyway,
Awesome.
you guys stay safe.
Will do. You too. Bye
All
bye.
right, take care. Bye.